Today's guest is Rebecca Cook. She has worked as an actress, director, costumer, makeup artist, accountant, producer, and director in film and theater throughout the Pacific Northwest. Past few years, she's worked on over 20 feature films, a bunch of TV shows like all 5 seasons of Syfy channel Z Nation, won awards for her short films, started her own company. She's on the board of directors for Washington Filmworks, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So Rebecca, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. What's your story? Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got to all those cool things?
Oh my gosh, how much time have we got?
Well, okay, summarize it.
Yeah, well, the quickest way to say is I'm a storyteller at heart and always have been, as well as a girl who just can't say no. So I've had a lot of opportunities, and I've been volunteered for a lot of things too over the years. But really, I'm from Spokane. I grew up in Spokane Valley, Central Valley Bear. Went to Spokane Falls Community College, got my radio degree, and then went to Eastern and got my theater degree, and somehow ended up in film. And when film incentives came to Washington a little over a decade ago, film came to Spokane. And so for a costumer like me at the time, that was mostly what I was doing. That's how I got my leg in film, doing set costuming. I had been working at local theaters as a costumer and all the other things you mentioned. But that's really where I got my leg in film, and joined the union, of which I'm now the vice president of IATSE Local 488, because I'm a big fan of labor and unions. So yeah, my passion for, sharing the joy of all the opportunities I've had has led me to work on all these organizations so other people can have these cool opportunities. Because I did the Seattle thing after I graduated from Eastern. I thought I had to move to Seattle to get a job in theater. I didn't think that would happen in Spokane. Moved over there, realized I'm a Spokaneite. I want to make my living where I love to be. So I moved back and ended up, I was working full-time in theater for a while and then transitioned over to film. So many stories in there, but
Sure.
That's where I'm at now. I actually, when I'm not working in film, between projects now, I'm a voiceover artist, so I record audiobooks.
So storytelling of all kinds, whether it's theater or it's in front of the camera or it's behind the camera, or it's narration and voiceovers. That's pretty cool, actually. So talking about film, I know from our previous conversations, you've had some wide-ranging experiences here in the Pacific Northwest. I was wondering, were there any particularly fun or challenging projects that you worked on?
Yes, a lot. I'll say, professionally speaking, one of my favorite films to work on is called Knights of Badassdom. And it's a horror comedy about LARPers who accidentally summon a demon. And as someone who grew up playing D&D and who was a LARPer for a time, my geek light got to shine. Plus, we shot that whole thing. It was exteriors, overnights in the woods. And as a night person, it was very exciting to work overnights. I loved that. And the director, Joe Lynch, was just like, he had the best of both worlds, where he was this kid at play having so much fun making his movie, but he also really knew what he wanted and respected everyone who was a part of the process. So it was really great. And, I got to meet Peter Dinklage, so that was super cool. So that was probably, professionally speaking, one of my favorite experiences.
That sounds pretty cool.
But yeah, I mean, other than the giant bugs, I had no idea. Like, there are things bigger than my hand that live in our woods, but we won't talk about that. as a set costume, you have to pull them off of people before they go on camera and pretend there wasn't a giant beetle just crawling up their leg. Super fun.
Nice.
Another project, if you don't mind me mentioning one more
Please.
in my more, I shouldn't say it's not professional, but it was something I did of my own volition. A few years ago, I did a short film called Where I Stand, which I directed and produced. And it was, the whole project was all women, both been in front of and behind the camera.
Mm.
Everyone involved was entirely female driven. And it was sort of well, it was definitely a labor of love, but an experiment for me in what that would look like. But we had 30 professionals and 30 amateurs on the project. So everyone had an amateur assigned to them to sort of job shadow them. And it was an incredible just learning experience. And it was beautiful to be on a project that was so much more about the journey than the end product.
Mm.
Not that I'm not proud of the end product, but it was just a different approach I really enjoyed.
So the story of that is more about, as you said, the journey and the way all the participants work together. I'm trying to remember, was this part of that project you were doing in Spokane a few years ago?
Oh, Spokane Film Project?
Yes.
So Spokane Film Project is a networking nonprofit organization. I'm actually the president of. I like to collect titles, but we're just a no-fee membership organization that just kind of tries to network and educate filmmakers in the region. But this was not under that umbrella. I actually created a group called SWIFT, Spokane Women in Film and Television, and that's the umbrella we did Where I Stand under. But I wasn't on the board of Spokane Film Project at that time. My gosh, it has been almost 5 years since we did that one. So COVID just erased a few years of time for me. I don't know.
Well, I think it has for all of us in a lot of different ways. Well, I guess I could ask this now, but I'm curious, what are the changes COVID has made to the film industry and theater that you think maybe permanent changes? Like, are there any permanent changes that are made, or do you think we're going to get back to the way we used to be?
I think that is such a great question. I think there are definitely something I see just, globally, we have awarenesses we didn't have, partially because of the huge Black Lives Matter movement that happened during COVID. So there's some social justice aspects to the industry and our approach to things that I sure as hell hope are going to be sorry, am I allowed to swear? I hope
you're allowed to swear.
Change.
We'll bleep it out later. Don't worry about it. Post-production.
Yeah, well, I sure as heck hope those will be permanent changes. But also, really, I mean, this is kind of true across the labor movement, is we're seeing the value in ourselves in a different way. We've had a huge influx of people wanting to join the union in the film industry and many other industries because they want the protections, they want contracts that are fair. They don't want to work, these, 20-hour days. And trust me, I've worked plenty of those. They are real. But I've also, for the last two projects that I worked on, we worked 10-hour days and they were very reasonable and we got the job done and it was great. So there's a lot of things I think we're looking in. People are valuing themselves, they're valuing their weekends, their family time, their sleep, and their own health and mental health in much more significant ways than we have in the past, and forcing the studios to recognize that and build it into the contracts and enforce them. So as a labor leader, we're being called in a lot more by our members to make sure their safety protocols are being enforced, which is great because we want that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really that's the real sea change I'm seeing. I also think we are going to go, I really think we're going to trend towards the shorter days. That's my humble opinion.
That would be lovely.
See a lot of stuff, right? Nothing like being up 24 hours and poking the prop guy next to you because he keeps falling asleep on your shoulder,
Wow. Boy, that sounds like my days working in the marketing industry. when I was much younger, and I was at the bottom of the totem pole there. There's a lot of good questions. We're going to get to some of them in a minute in the text chat, I see, but I'm going to keep talking about some of the things you just mentioned. You have had the perspectives on film and television from a lot of angles. It's almost a holistic perspective, because not only have you been, as I said before, you've been in front of the camera and you've been behind the camera as a director or a producer, but you've also been, you've worked on the sets, you've worked on all aspects of what all the clothes they're wearing and props, and you've been an accountant, and I mean, working for the union and for Washington Filmworks gives you kind of a very high level view of things and perspectives. And I'm curious, is there one perspective that you feel like has given you the most interesting view of the industry, or do you see it all as a blend?
What a great question. I have to say, because I never saw it coming, being an accountant in film has given me perspectives that I find are very unique, because there are not a lot of people who get a theater degree and go into accounting. And that's probably a good thing, if I'm perfectly honest. Yeah, because I have to understand every contract, every detail of them. I have to, communicate with every department in different ways. I have to understand, I shouldn't say I have to, I get to understand their needs in different ways as I'm paying invoices and looking, tracking at the people they're hiring and onboarding folks. It really, film accounting is an incredible way to see the full picture from like a financial standpoint. But I'd been on set for, I don't know, 8 years before I went into the office and started working in the production office in accounting. And that's what made me valuable. Well, I guess I'll just tell the story a little, if that's okay.
Sure, please.
How that happened. So I'd worked in wardrobe. I was a wardrobe supervisor season 1 of Z Nation, and season 2, they brought in a new costume designer, and she wanted to bring in her own team, which is not untypical, but she didn't want to hire any of us from the previous season. And so I found myself without a job, and there's only ever one union job shooting in Spokane at any given time, generally speaking, although that's starting to shift. But anyway, I needed a job. I needed to pay my bills. And so I went to the UPM, and I thought, I have a lot of experience, ADing, assistant directing. And I thought maybe I could get into that world. And he was like, oh, we've always wanted to try this. And I know how good you are with spreadsheets and time cards as a wardrobe supervisor. Let's put you in accounting.
Just what you wanted to hear.
Right. The dream. But yeah, I literally was told, that onset experience you have is so valuable, but we can teach a trained monkey to run numbers, so you can do this. But in the meantime, we do something very unique here in Spokane. We run all of our accounting in-house, which normally you would send it out to a payroll company. And I didn't realize how unique this is, but I've been meeting with different producers, and I met with an app developer this week who's developing some software for the film industry, who wanted to understand the accounting side. And he was just blown away that anyone does in-house accounting in film. So I'm learning all these things. And again, getting different perspectives of the industry because of that. But it really, anyway, it's really opened my eyes to how many tiny little details there are in this industry that I wouldn't know about otherwise. Did I answer the question?
No, I think so, but I'm curious, do you feel like having seen the constellation, the universe of these details, does that make you a better director, producer? Does that help you with your job with Washington Filmworks, all of that?
150%. Yeah. I am really unique in the perspectives I get to have. And so there's also a big responsibility there to make sure I'm representing all the sides of it that I can see. But I do feel like I'm super blessed to be able to have that kind of perspective on what I do. And really, if I had my druthers, I would be directing all the time. That's what I would like to be doing. I'm making inroads. I'm the only accountant who gets invited to production meetings because the producer I work with knows that I really find that valuable, and he finds my input valuable there. So there's, all kinds of unique opportunities I get because I have worked in these many places, and because I'm not shy about saying, this is what I want. I want to be directing episodes of your television show. So he says, okay, well, come to a production meeting and I value your input. So none of this comes from me sitting in the corner being quiet. I will say that much. Let me say that one more time. None of this comes from sitting in the corner being quiet.
Did you hear what Rebecca just said about don't sit in the corner and be quiet? Okay, know what you want to go after. And I don't know the film industry. This is not my field. Okay, my field is design, communications, marketing, and all that kind of thing. But something that you were just talking about really jives with my own experience, which is that understanding the business side of the industry makes me a better designer. It simply does. It helps me talk to clients better. It helps me talk to all kinds of people I have to work with better. And it helps me understand sort of the materials I have to work with better. So just as, to all the students here, I know we've got people interested in film, we got people interested in design or animation, whatever it is. Don't forget the business side of things. It may feel like it's the boring side of things, but it will give you a really cool perspective. So I just had to put that in there.
Yeah, well, and it helps you protect yourself too, because there are a lot of people who want to take advantage of artists because we do what we love. So we shouldn't want to have to get paid for that.
Right.
Not true.
So, is that something you could talk about a little more? How do artists protect themselves? What do you mean by that? Like, I think I know what you mean, but for the sake of the students.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I started out, I volunteered for everything. I was just happy to be a part of things. But you reach a point where your work is valuable. That experience you've gained is valuable. And deciding when that point is not easy. But here's the thing I always say, particularly to voiceover artists, when you're taking a job and you're asked to work for free, find out, first of all, is anybody making money off of that work you're doing? Because if someone's making money off of that, you deserve something for that. Now, if this is a nonprofit organization that does not have a big budget, there's like Feral Cat Rescue that I enjoy doing work for free because they don't have any money, but I love the work they're doing. And this is my donation to them. Right. Okay, that's cool. I'm not cutting anybody else out of a job because they don't have money to pay someone else to do it. I'm not undercutting anyone in the industry. No one's making money off of my work in an unethical way. I'm not lining the pockets of the 1%, So really, when you're deciding if you're going to take a job for free, is it valuable in that way? Or what are you getting out of it for you? Because you could be making contacts that are going to be valuable later. You could be getting experience that's going to be important to that next step in your career. And that's okay. It's great if those are actually under an internship program, so you're getting school credit for it, or someone is monitoring that and looking out for you. Because when you are the low person on the totem pole, no matter who you are, where you come from, what age or experience level you are, it is harder to speak up for yourself. So having someone who's in an ethical position to look out for you can be really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I underline that and, put some exclamation points after it. And then there's also the contracts side of the industry, which I'm betting are even more important in your industry than they are in mine, but they're important in both. I'm wondering, can you talk about some of the issues there that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, let me tell you the number one thing that we push everybody in the film industry, all artists, frankly, is 1099 versus W-2. So if they're asking you to fill out a W-4, that means you're going to be an employee and you're going to be covered by all of their insurances and taxes and L&I. And if you are, if they ask you to fill out a W-9, which means you're getting a 1099, that means you're an independent contractor. So all that's on you. You're going to pay the taxes. You're going to be responsible for you. And if you are like a graphic designer working at home, they give you a project that has a deadline, you're pretty much managing yourself in your space. That's totally cool to be an independent contractor. That's what you are. That's what that's designated for. But if you're on a film crew where you're given a call time, you're going to show up, you're going to be working on set with all these people, and you are not the person in charge of your day and your work and your workspace, you're an employee. You are not an independent contractor, and they should be covering you as an employee. You should be getting a W-2. You should be asked to be classified as an employee. It is very standard practice in this business not to, but it is illegal. And they can get, during COVID, we learned a whole lot of people who went to apply for unemployment didn't qualify because they had only been working as independent contractors.
Ouch.
So we were able to get in Washington state, some of the laws changed. The labor movement worked real hard on this to get some of that changed. So what happens is you can still file, but you have to prove you were misclassified, which means showing your call sheets. I was shown I had to show up at this time and I was on their set. So I was an employee. Anyway, I could go on and on about that, but getting properly classified is step one in any of the work you're going to do. When you get into union projects, like I work on, there are big contracts. If you are a contract nerd like me and you want to just check one out, the Area Standards Agreement for Low Budget Films for IATSE, IATSE, that's the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. Sorry, I throw out a lot of acronyms, but that's all the film crews of the United States and Canada are covered by IATSE and Union Filmwork. And there's a whole deep dive I could go on that, but we won't. Anyway, if you want to just check one out, the Area Standards Agreement for IATSE Low Budget Films in the US is kind of a cool one to sort of read about. It's what covers a lot of the work we do around here.
Nice.
But
and
reading the contract is not for everyone. I totally get that.
It's worth doing at least once. You should understand these things, even if it doesn't become your focus in the industry. And that's true for graphic design as well. I talk about different sample contracts in some of my classes. The AIGA, which is the American Institute of Graphic Artists, or the Graphic Artists Guild, which unfortunately is known as GAG, but they have awesome resources on contracts. So whatever your field is, go find out what the contracts are. You need to protect yourself when you're working, whether you're a freelancer, independent contractor, employee, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and have a contract before you turn over any work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even an email that details everything out can hold up in court.
Well,
it should be a formalized contract, but.
And you were just talking about how people could, since you lobbied to change the laws, people could then prove they were actually an employee if they had saved the call sheets and these other materials. So save your documentation. Don't throw it out yet.
Yes, yes. Oh, underline that. Save everything for at least 3 years. 7 is better.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Financial. So, it's funny because you're an extremely creative person, and we teach I teach creative classes, and yet we're talking about the business side of things because it actually is really important. And that's where most of my pain is in the design industry, is in the business side of things anyway. So you got to learn how to do it well.
Well, and people are going to go and find all the creative outlets and information and inspiration they want. But I think it's important the hard truths also come along with it, that no one's going to go look up a W-9 for fun. That's, not
you are looking it up for fun, there's a problem. But anyway. So, and then the whole Washington Filmworks and like the union and lobbying, that is a whole other perspective on the industry. And it's really cool that you have this experience promoting creatives in the industry and workers in the industry and trying to improve the conditions for them. Can you talk a little bit more about those efforts? What got you into that?
Yeah, I did not care about politics really much at all, except maybe who I voted for president. Until one year, the Washington State Film Incentive got suspended because of some just politicking, where the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader were in an argument. And because our program was the beloved child of one of them, the other one just suspended funding for a year because he felt like it. And I'm really simplifying what happened, but that's basically it. And because of that, I didn't have work for a year and a half. I almost lost my house. And when I tell that story, every year we have to go and fight for them to renew the film incentive, it resonates because I'm a real person who really was harmed by this program not being in place for a year. It is vital to people like me. And we are not the majority of laborers in the state. I get that. We're a pretty small minority, but we are a robust industry that brings a lot of prestige to some of these lawmakers when they want to go out and campaign and they have a picture of themselves as a zombie on Z Nation. It resonates with their constituents. So we take full advantage of that. Yeah, I didn't care at all until it hit me where it really hurt. And so now I'm far more involved in politics than my father would like. But I care because I see how much it really impacts me and how important it is who I vote for on every level. And how that matters. So through Washington Filmworks this year, we had I'll cry if I talk about it too much because we finally had the biggest win. For 10 years, I have been going to Olympia nearly every year and often organizing a busload of Spokanites, like 30 of us going over the pass, leaving at 4 a.m. so we can get to Olympia for film day in Olympia, where we all go in and have meetings with our legislators. And then we ride the bus back, and dear God, we've almost died so many times on the winter passes. But the bus drivers of Alpha Omega are the best. Kudos to them. They don't pay me to say that, but I say it anyway. We haven't lost anyone yet. But it's this crazy day, but it is worth it. And finally, after 10 years, I think, of this work, we have increased our film incentive from 3.5 million to 15 million.
That's amazing.
It is, isn't it?
That's
so it
cool.
used to be, one season of Z Nation ate up almost the entire film incentive. But now we've got enough, then that employed 100 crew for about 6 months, but now we've got enough money to, we've quadrupled that. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's big. It's big. Anyway, it's exciting.
Is there another challenge that you're trying to tackle? What's the next big challenge?
With Washington Filmworks,
yeah,
they added throughout the process all these fun little provisions, like you can get an added bonus to your incentive if you shoot in rural counties. You can get an added bonus if you're telling stories of underrepresented communities. There's all these little carve-outs they put in there, and now we have to figure out how to implement them all. And it goes into effect July 1st. So we got a little work to do.
Yeah.
It's good work.
Yeah, that's exciting. Those are all good things, but it's still work. It's still a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I'm going to back up a second. I'm going to just look through some of the questions here. In a very specific local question, a student's asking, they said they had seen a plane crash set in downtown Spokane for Z Nation a few years ago. How did you get permission to do that? How do you get permission to set up huge sets in public spaces? What's the planning look like?
It all starts with film permits. So the city of Spokane, you have to find out, where you're filming, if it's on public property. The city of Spokane has a permitting office. I know the ladies there, they are wonderful and so helpful. And fortunately, we have worked real hard, mostly collectively as filmmakers in Spokane, to foster that relationship. So Spokane is a very film friendly town, as long as you have the proper permits and ask politely. If you're rude, they'll call your mom. It's just how it is. um, but really it starts with just, having a clear plan of what you're going to do, contacting the city. They will help you navigate a lot of those things. If you're filming in some place like Spokane, they know how to do that, and there are forms. If you're in Spokane Valley or you're in Ritzville, things are a little less organized, but always try and contact the city council wherever you're at and just let them know what you're doing. And most times my experience has been they just get so excited about it. They're super helpful in ways you never would have expected. But having that permission is so important. For the plane crash, that was in Riverfront Park. So we also had to deal with the Spokane Parks Commission, which again, the city of Spokane permitting division helped us navigate all that. But they've got all kinds of forms in place, and you have to pay fees depending on what you're doing. You have to get all the permissions. It's not cheap, I should say, to the average filmmaker, but it's also not expensive compared to a lot of other places to film. So it can be done. For my film, I did the all women's film. We actually shut down a city street because I needed to do a women's march, and they helped me shut down a block. And we filmed in the middle of the street for a day. It was great.
Nice. I want to point out a concept here, which is of the gatekeeper, all the different people you need to get permission from in order to do these things. Always be nice to the gatekeepers, right? Get a good rapport with them. This is true in the design industry as well, or in large corporations. Be nice to those people, because when they are happy to help you, things go so much easier.
You just never know who's going to be the person that's going to help you and be on your side. It's I'm like living proof. You meet me, I'm just your average cat loving nerd, but I got the keys to a lot of gates. So you just never know who's going to be the person who will help you. So it pays to be kind to everyone.
Yeah. And this comes with experience too. Like, it's, you work with someone for years and you get a rapport with them. So
I just actually before this meeting got an email from a former student of mine who's looking for an internship, and I had given him some contacts, and I said, use my name. I don't have time to contact them myself, but these guys are great. And he got an internship with a local studio, and he said, I asked him, why he chose me, and he said, you said the magic words, Rebecca Cook. And
that's awesome.
I know, sorry, that sounds really egomaniacal of me to share, but it impressed me to hear it.
Well, when you've been doing something well and you have all of these connections, that's what happens. That's just what happens. I
wouldn't send it to someone I didn't believe in. So yeah.
Sure, right. So you have standards. They know that. They've worked with you. So having a good reputation is also helpful in an industry, and that I can't emphasize that enough. And having a bad reputation is hard to overcome.
I have burned bridges, I'll admit, because I am a ruthlessly ethical person, and I'm not gonna stand for people being taken advantage of, and I will call them out. And I have made some enemies, but I don't mind those enemies because they're not people I want to work with anyway. I'm not saying you should do that. And I'm a woman in my 40s who's allowed to do that now. So wait for your time, it will come. And boy, is it freeing. But yeah, it's okay to also take a stand against the bad people.
Yeah, some enemies are worth having, I suppose.
Yeah, but don't use social media for that.
Yeah. Social media is a whole other line of conversation. So, so you have been in storytelling in one way or the other for a really long time. And I'm curious about the changes you've seen. You know, for example, I know over the last 20, 30 years, there's been a shift to digital from film, right? That's happened in our lifetimes. Many of these
Yeah.
students, maybe not, you know, we've always been digital, right? Come on. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, what are the biggest changes you've seen over the years? And, you know, do you see anything coming up that might be a good game changer?
Yeah, so there, I mean, what a great question. The technology shift has been amazing because I did start out working on film where you actually had a film loader on set, you know, who had to reach their hands in the blackout bag and change out film rolls that weren't exposed to the light. And he was doing it all blind and it was amazing. You know, like I think the last film I worked on was actual film was a John Carpenter film, which was, you
Oh,
know, amazing. But the shift to digital is really interesting because I remember specifically when I was working on the John Carpenter film, it was great because we only shot 8-hour days because John Carpenter's old. Dude knows what he wants and he doesn't play, you know? Um, he rehearsed his actors beforehand, and we only, because you're working on film, you only did like 3 takes maximum of something because film's freaking expensive and it takes time to load that and all this. Whereas in the digital world, we've kind of given up on rehearsing. We'll maybe rehearse it once, and then we'll just shoot all the rehearsals, and there'll be so much footage, and your editors are going to go cross-eyed trying to organize it all. So that's the biggest shift. Now, what's happening is the shift to streamers away from like your traditional studio setups. Particularly in the union world, we had all these contracts that were new media when Netflix first started, but you know, and they were these low budget because we didn't know if they were going to be successful. We didn't know if it was going to last. Turns out it is, and they are. And so we're having to renegotiate all these like low budget contracts to finally meet the money they're making off of our crews' backs. So that's a big shift. You know, I think cable's going to go away. The traditional cable we're used to, it's going to all be, you know, you just pay for the channels you want kind of thing. Is the direction we're headed for those of us that still own actual televisions and cable boxes.
well, now
um,
it's all streaming and you have to pick the app you want, right? The service. But
right. Yeah. So there's that. And I honestly thought that the 3D world was going to be more prolific than it was. I actually was one of the producers on the very first narrative film that was shot all in with a 3D, not 3D, 360 camera.
oh,
So shot with all the way around. And oh my God, was that a learning experience. But Ruth and I worked together. That was the project we first met on.
oh, Professor Ruth Gregory here in DTC.
Oh, yes, sorry.
No, I'm just making sure
Yeah.
the students know who I'm talking about. We're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, I should have. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, Ruth brought me in on that project. And I really thought that technology, I mean, it's certainly improved immensely from when we did it. But I thought that technology would be a lot more prolific than it's been. So it was more, feels like more of a passing fad at this point, unless you're really into the video game technology of it.
So I'm curious, with the changes in the medium, the changes in the process, how has that changed the storytelling?
That is an excellent question. Yes, a lot of excellent questions. I don't think the storytelling at its heart has changed much, if I'm being
Yeah.
perfectly honest, because a good story is a good story. And if you shoot it on your phone with your friends, if it's a good story and you tell it well, it's still a good story. um, but well, I mean, you can look at all these different indie films, you know, who are shot on a budget of almost nothing and that are still amazing. And, you know, there are still budgets of, you know, $100 million that are total bupkis, you know. I mean, it's just, if you don't have the story and if you don't tell the story well, and if you don't make decisions that serve the story, then your audience doesn't care. You're not going to keep them. I actually just watched the latest West Side Story the other night.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, I remember seeing the original and here, Steven Spielberg remakes West Side Story. What's that about? And I don't know that, I don't know how much it speaks to a modern young audience. There's a lot of nostalgia in it for me, remembering seeing it before and all those songs we had to, listen to from the marching band and all that. But the story was still beautiful. Like I was still completely engaged in these wonderful actors and the beautiful music and the cinematography. And it was still like this beautiful story being told, even though it's so out of date.
So part of the storytelling question then is the audience, right? It may have connected with people of our generation in a way that it's not connecting to some of the younger generation, potentially.
Yeah, and I haven't done any survey on that, but I am like, it is in the back of my mind to start talking to some younger folks and see how it resonated with them, who are not like a theater crowd who loved it, if the story holds up for other folks. But
So,
knowing your audience, I mean, that's huge too.
now in the design world, especially on the web and in interactive design, there's this tendency for people to think that some cool new technology is going to be sufficient to bring people in. And now, in interactive stuff, we're hoping to engage them in some way, probably ultimately to spend money in some way, or join a cause, whatever it might be. But to me, there is always still a storytelling aspect to it, and maybe that's colored. Like I worked for more than almost 13 years at an international nonprofit. So a lot of the work we did was fundraising, but a lot of it was also educational and so on. But the story was still always the thing that convinced people the most of the importance of something. I think that's also true in corporate marketing. I worked there for years as well. And so I see what you're saying. Like, new technology doesn't replace good story.
I firmly believe that. We have all these new animations and different ways to, like age people down and, do all this amazing CGI work. And it's cool. And, you can bring me to the theater to see a Fast and Furious 178 because the stuff they do with cars is cool and I enjoy watching those stunts.
Right.
But I'm not coming for the story, I'll admit. But I shouldn't say that. I'm not coming because I'm expecting a life-changing story, but I need characters I can relate to at the very least. I need characters that I find interesting. I need a little bit of the story at least. If you're selling me on big special effects, I may still show up. But if there's not at least relatable characters somewhere in there and some kind of story, why bother?
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be, and we see that in movies all the time where, it's big stars and a huge budget and it's just a terrible movie. Somebody finally convinced me to try watching the film adaptation of Cats recently, which I did not make more than 15 minutes through. But I had seen it on Broadway, okay, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
Because of the set design, and like you would sit in the audience and the actors would be like walking past you and like climbing over you. Like it was just a completely different experience. In the movie, I was like, how much did you spend on this? That was amazing. Anyway.
I haven't even gone there and I love Cats.
Don't just don't.
After what they did to Les Miserables, I'm out.
Fair point. Hey, a student asked an interesting question here. Are there any films that you've worked on, or I would say TV shows, that you didn't necessarily like, but you had to finish anyway? And how did you get through it?
Yeah, because I got paid. I mean, yeah, so the end of the day, I'm still just like all of you. I got bills. And not every job you're gonna love. Oh my God. I mean, if you go look me up on IMDb, I'm Rebecca Cook 2. That's how long I've been around. There's like 7 now. But I think the Ward is the one that usually comes up, or Keeping Up with the Joneses. Anyway, you'll find me. But you'll look at that, and there are so many movies on there that, I mean, we made a lot of action movies here, the Cuba Gooding Jr. phase, if you will. And they're fine, but a lot of them, there were some producers on some, that just made it miserable. Some of them, like, is that there was one we were working 20-hour days regularly before we called our business agent and said we can't keep doing this. Yeah, there have been some miserable ones. There's stories I'm not particularly proud of. I can't say there's anything I've been on that, was so unethical I didn't walk away, because I have walked away from things I felt were unethical. But if it just, I just don't like it, like, art is subjective, it just is what it is. But if they're, abusing you or not paying you, or, the work conditions are untenable, I've been screamed at by people. I don't enjoy that. I don't believe anyone deserves that. I'm secure enough in my career now to either scream back or walk away. But, there are going to be a lot of unpleasant experiences you have as you're building your career in very unexpected ways. I was stage managing Gypsy, starring Patty Duke here in Spokane. And Patty Duke Anna and I became very good friends. I would have taken a bullet for that woman. She was lovely. But one night on stage, she screamed at me because the dress was just not placed exactly where she wanted it, and had a whole meltdown. And everyone's looking at me like, oh my God, you poor thing. And I knew that her son had just been diagnosed with facial cancer right before rehearsal that night. So I was fine to take that bullet, and it was okay. And I was okay. And, she just needed someone to lash out at that she was safe with, and that was okay. There are a million things people are going through that you have no idea about. And let me say this to all of you. It is not about you. When someone freaks out like that, it is almost never about you. Something is going on with them, and it is so hard to recognize it in that moment. But people in this industry, we're doing volatile things, working long hours, and they're fragile. Actors in particular, it's part of their job to be fragile. And if you can distance yourself from what's happening to you in that moment, to realize it isn't so much about you, but something that's going on behind the scenes with them, you will save yourself a lot of mental anguish.
Amen to that. And that's not just the film industry. That's the design industry. Heck, that's just life. That's that's life. And you were talking about Patty Duke and how you knew this thing. And again, it comes back to a relationship. You knew somebody, and so you were able to respond differently than maybe you would have otherwise. So those personal relationships are actually still the most important part of getting our jobs done in a lot of ways.
Yeah. When I used to teach theatrical makeup, I always would remind my makeup artists, like, you're doing a complex art thing here, but there is a person underneath it all, and you can never forget that person is there.
Right. Yeah. So students have asked a lot of questions. We are not going to get to all of them. I just want to give a time check. We have about 7 minutes. Here's a question for you that you may hate, but what's something you wish you had known before you got into the film industry? Something you can share with students who are interested in getting into it.
Probably that thing I just said about, it's not about you. Don't take it personally. I wish I had known. I feel like I've shared a lot of it already. I wish I had known how to read a call sheet. The first time that you're about to show up on a job, they'll send you a call sheet, and it is not intuitive in a lot of ways. So find someone who'll teach you how to read a call sheet before your first day on set. Also, it's made fun of a lot of times, but like, don't look an actor in the eye when they're working. that actor is in a different headspace trying to do their job and pretend the rest of you don't exist. And that's why they say that. It's not because you're so far beneath them, they don't want you to look them in the eye. It's they're trying to get into a different creative headspace, and just allowing them the space to do their job allows them to allow you the space to do your job as well. You know, when it's your turn, get in there and do it. But when it's not, make space for other people to get their work done. But yeah, I could go on and on about things I wish I'd known, but there's
Sure, give us a couple more. Go ahead.
a couple more. First day on any job, be sure you take in your driver's license and your social security card or your passport, because you need it for the paperwork. Also,
there's that paperwork again.
I know, I'm such a nerd. When the director calls cut, it doesn't necessarily mean that camera has cut. As someone who used to hold the warming jackets for all the cold actors on set, and when the director would call cut, I would rush in with their coats. I didn't realize the DP was still rolling, and on one film got the nickname Rebecca Walks in the Shot. Make sure camera has cut before you walk in.
Now, and I'm going to say these kinds of details, there is something like that in the design world, right? Obviously, we don't have sets and everything, but there's always these little tricks of the trade or mistakes that you learn not to make, typically with a client presentation or, you know, some kind of production thing. But yeah, no, that's all good advice, and very, what's the word here? Non-academic. Like, that's real world stuff that maybe you wouldn't necessarily learn in school.
Yeah, I mean, the simple truth is, you know, you get your degree and you leave school and you feel hopefully somewhat prepared to launch into it. But there's going to be 4 million more lessons waiting for you along the way. I'm still learning them, you know, 20 some odd years into my career.
Well, I don't think anyone stops learning. If you feel like you don't have anything else to learn, then you actually have a lot to learn.
Amen.
All right, so students, do you have any last questions here? I'm just scrolling through, make sure we get stuff here.
Oh, I'm looking at a couple. You do not have to have a degree to work in the film industry. Yeah. It's not something people tend to look at, if I'm being honest. Sometimes if you want to be a DP, they get a little fancy, but experience means more than a degree, which is terrible to say to a college class. But I think degrees are wonderful and helpful and useful. And the connections you make in your college years are the people you're going to stay in touch with and support each other through the rest of your lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and like in the design world, a really solid portfolio, in other words, experience, is going to trump a degree from a fancy school. It just is.
Yeah. Your resume, your IMDb page, these all matter in the film industry. I worked on the ward. I couldn't believe it either.
Do you have any questions about that specifically on the ward?
Was I scared? Yes. Oh my God. So we're filming out at Eastern State Hospital in like buildings that have been not used in like 30 years. They let us film there. The first day I went out, we had to go and get like training for how to be on the Eastern State campus and not engage with any of the people out there. It is a place for, it's an asylum. So, you know, there are criminally insane people in one of the wards out there. So it's a campus that's locked down for a reason. But literally while I was out there getting the training of, you know, all the things not to do, it's me and about 4 other crew members, and an inmate escaped and we went into lockdown before we'd even started filming. That was my first experience. And then later on, in the middle of the show, my case had gotten locked on set because I was just leaving it there. I was going to use it the next day, my on-set case, but there was something I needed out of it. So I had to go into the building, but none of the transpo guys were there yet to turn on the generators. So there was no power in the building. So I'm going through that place with my flashlight all alone. And, like, we've made it a horror set. And I did not feel alone. creepiest ways. But John Carpenter, like amazing director, learned so much from him. That was my first horror movie, and I love horror. It was a dream come true.
That sounds really freaky. I don't know if I would have been able to handle that, but
It was a moment. I couldn't get anyone to go in with me. It was like the worst part. Was I ever starstruck? So many times, but I'm a professional and I'm also an actor. The worst was probably Christian Slater came, and I had like the Christian Slater collection when I was a teenager. Like he was my guy. And when we found out he was coming, my costume designer was like, Rebecca, you're gonna be able to hold it together. I'm like, yes, I can. Don't you take away Christian. And I held it together the whole time. At the end of the film, I was like, oh, Christian, can we get a picture together? Because I just have to tell you. And then I told him what a fan I was. And he just looks at me. He's like, Rebecca, I had no idea. It's a little creepy, but let's take a picture. It was fun, a lot of fun. Yeah, it's easy. And do we have time for one more?
Yeah, we got time for one more.
Okay, so the one time I did not expect to get starstruck was Snoop Dogg came to town, and I was the on-set costumer. And I'm not like into rap. Like I respect it as an art form. It's just not my thing. And I'm really not into pot. Like again, I respect your right to smoke it, but it was not my thing. So Snoop Dogg coming, especially at that time when nothing was legal, I was like, oh dear God, I'm going to have to deal with this. And I gotta tell you, that guy oozes charm. I will never forget, like first day on set, and I'm going up and handing him his hat because it was part of his costume. He was a doorman, so I'm, brushing down his jacket shoulders to make sure it all looks good, and he just looks down at me. He's like, thanks, babe. And I giggled like a little schoolgirl. I don't know what came over me, but that man's charisma was mind-blowing. He was still, a lot. But nice enough guy, but his people handled all of his troubles. But yeah, I did not expect to get starstruck, but I kind of did.
That's awesome. One of the students here commented that all your experiences make the film industry feel human. And honestly, I think that really comes back to a lot of the things that we've talked about. Actually, the film industry is human. So is the design industry. It all comes down to the people, the relationships, the connections, whether you're dealing with the gatekeeper who, who works at the city council and has to sign your form so you can film your thing, or it's the payroll people or the contract people. It's all just people.
I think that is perfectly stated, and it's so true. Like all of us are just waiting for everyone else to figure out we don't know what we're really doing.
Yeah, we don't actually. We call this the expert series, but it's actually the still learning series.
Yeah. Pretending to be expert.
Right. Well, our time is up. I really appreciate our conversation tonight, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone.